will emerge, I am emerging, or I have emerged, but his mind has previously been developed in such a way that it leads him to that state. In other words, he's made before he went into the state, he makes that prior determination, I will remain for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Then when the time comes to an end, even without his thinking about it, automatically he comes out. How that happens, I don't know, but it's a little bit like maybe you might go to sleep and you don't set the alarm clock, but you make the determination, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. And then it takes a little practice, but once you get accustomed to that, as soon as 5 a.m. comes, you automatically wake up. How does it happen? You're not cheating, like opening one eye while you're asleep and looking at the clock. You haven't set the alarm clock. Nobody is waking you up. But just somehow the mind gets trained that in such a way that as soon as 5 o'clock comes, you wake up.
The consciousness still working
Yeah.
aware.
Yeah. But that is an analogy to what happens with this attainment of cessation. Okay, so when the monk is emerging from the attainment of cessation, perception and feeling, what of these activities arise in him first? So first, the mental activity arises, then the bodily activity, then the verbal activity. Where does the mental activity arise? As he's coming out. Actually, maybe I should try to answer it in that way. Okay, but he comes out from the attainment of cessation. First there's perception and feeling, then he starts breathing again, and then thought and examination occur, Visakha and vichara. Okay, this is a little bit of an obscure question, the next one. Again, these questions are at a very high level. When the monk has emerged from the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling, how many kinds of contact touch him? What does he contact? What does he experience? And then she answers, when the monk has emerged from the attainment of perception and feeling, 3 kinds of contact touch him, or he experiences 3 kinds of contact. One is called voidness contact, another is signless contact, the third is desireless contact. Now what is explained, to understand this, one has to look at the commentary. And the commentary explains that when the meditator comes out from the attainment of cessation, the first thing that is experienced is nibbana. The state of mind arises in which one experiences nibbana. It's actually a fruition attainment that one experiences. And nibbana is experienced in either of 3 ways. Either it's experienced as voidness or emptiness, or it's experienced as voidness or emptiness in the sense of that which has no substance, no substantial nature, is experienced as signless, that which has no identifying characteristics or signs, or it's experienced as the desireless, that in which there's no desires, no wishes. And so it's said that when one emerges from the attainment of cessation, just there's this brief, fleeting experience of nibbana, and then one comes back into normal states of consciousness, or ordinary states of consciousness. But then after, the next question, after the monk has emerged from the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling. To what does his mind incline? To what does it lean to? What does it tend to? And then she answers, after emerging from the attainment of cessation, the mind inclines to seclusion, leans to seclusion, tends to seclusion. And what's meant by seclusion here, again, according to the commentary, is that experience of Nibbana. And so after emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, the perception of feeling, the cessation of perception and feeling itself is not an experience of Nibbana. But when one comes out of it, one has this momentary experience of Nibbana. One comes back to an ordinary state of consciousness, and then the mind has this leaning or inclination towards Nibbana, towards the experience of Nibbana. Okay, I'm explaining partly according to the commentary, partly to my own understanding, but don't say, can't you speak from your own experience about this? I'm afraid not. Anybody have any other things? Bhikkhu Dhammadinna? Maybe, do you know any discussions about this in Mahavibhasa?
Yeah, they have lots. Anyway, I have a question. What is seclusion in the Pali word?
The Pali word for seclusion? It's viveka. Okay, I'll ask for questions here at this point. Maybe take the mobile microphone.
Thank you. The cessation of breathing that is not to be taken literally. That is one ceases to be aware of one's breathing. Is that correct?
That's an interesting question, and the
I
way
mean, one needs to breathe, otherwise
it's
it lasts very long.
yeah, it's understood in the text that one stops breathing, but I know physiologically it said that breath is necessary. So I'm just wondering whether this means that the breath becomes so subtle that it seems as if it's not occurring.
I think oxygen is necessary, breathing is not necessary. If you have oxygen in your body,
It could be that
consume a lot of oxygenesis,
it could be that in this state of the fourth jhana, the body is able to use oxygen in a much slower and more frugal way than when we're in an ordinary state of consciousness. Or it could be that the body is getting the oxygen it needs by breathing through the pores of the skin. I don't know. I just know all the text says is in the fourth jhana, asasa, pasasa, in breathing, out breathing, cease.
There are lots of Hindu stories of people ceasing their breathing, and seen demonstrations of yogas standing up with their heads in the sand, with their faces completely covered for like 18 hours at a stretch, supposedly not breathing at all.
So I could see, if one has the head in the sand, it wouldn't be very comfortable. But one could still...
Might be possible.
Excuse me?
Yeah, it may be possible if they're really breathing it.
To do the experiment really effectively, what we would have to do would be to put a gag over somebody's, like a tight rubber gag over their nostrils and block the nostrils completely. Well, not only the nostrils, but the mouth. David, were you to make something?
No, fine, thanks.
I know years ago, maybe in the 1970s, I heard of experiments like this done on yogis, Indian yogis, and I think that they indicated that they weren't breathing in the state of samadhi. So it could be the case.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
First one, what is the Pali word for voidness here? Is this?
It's sunyata.
Is this? It is.
It's sunyata. usually translated as emptiness.
But it has a different meaning from what we normally know as sunyata.
Well, let us say that the use of the word sunyata comes originally from the early suttas, and then it becomes sort of elaborated in Prajnaparamita sutras and then in Nagarjuna. So it takes on maybe different meanings as it gets elaborated. But here it's being used in relation to Nibbana. Anyway, there's one sutta which speaks about Nibbana as being void or empty, and that it's empty of greed, empty of hatred, empty of delusion. But I don't know whether that really goes far enough. I would say also that there's a sense of what I would call maybe a metaphysical emptiness, that it doesn't have any of the, say, features of conditioned reality to it. So in that sense, it's experienced as a state of emptiness.
And also, at this stage, when one exits the state of no perception and feeling, one has the experience of Nibbana.
Yeah.
Does insight have anything to, has insight taken place at this point? And I ask this question because it seems to me that all it requires is to reach the eighth.
No, no. If you remember when I was explaining the way to enter cessation of feeling and perception, as one is undertaking the process aimed at entering it, one develops each jhanic state, then one emerges and contemplates it as impermanent, suffering and non-self. Then one goes into the next one, contemplates it as impermanent, suffering, non-self, through all 8 levels. Or actually first through the 7 levels, and I guess the 8th is subsumed under that. And in order to achieve, it's said in order to achieve the cessation of perception and feeling, one has to be either a non-returner or an arhat. Other people can't achieve it.
Oh.
And so it does require the strength of the insight or wisdom which has brought a person to the level of non-returner or arhat.
So a non-Buddhist, in the most strict sense of not having the insight that Buddha taught,
Yeah.
that person cannot reach the 8th level of concentration.
No.
Thank you.
It's not that there's a certain religious label that gives one a pass to the state, but one has to develop the insights, the specific insights of impermanent, dukkha, and non-self, and reach those levels of realization, the 3rd and 4th levels of realization. Any further questions? Okay, then I'll take internet questions. I think this is the internet question. Okay. He says, as I understand it, samadhi is a higher state of consciousness achieved by focusing on a single object, but the focusing itself is not samadhi. I have heard the word samatha. Would that be the word for the process of focusing? Actually, I think the word samatha is really equivalent to samadhi. But what would be called the process of focusing would be called, you can call it samadhi bhavana, which means development of samadhi, or samatha bhavana, the development of serenity or tranquility. So bhavana is the word that means development, and the process of focusing is part of the process of development. So we can say that the focusing is part of bhavana. Question 1. Question 2. Isn't attainment of cessation of perception and feeling referring to the attainment of the arhats? Does it mean the cessation or abandoning of consciousness too? Is the ego self still there? I already said that this attainment is of cessation of feeling perception. It's said to be accessible to non-returners and to arahats. And the non-returner still has a subtle sense of the ego self, though no longer any view of the ego self. But of course, within the attainment, there's no longer any sense of ego self. It's completely silence. Okay, one more question. Is Visakha's question about the three formations intended to explore the cessation of human existence, the ending of samsara, the end of the bodily, verbal, and consciousness formation? No, I don't take it in that sense. These are the question about the three formations is intended to lead into the discussion of the attainment of this meditative state, cessation of feeling and perception. Okay then another question. Some commentaries match voidness, signless, and desireless to the particular emphasis of the yogi on anatta, non-self, anicca, impermanence, and dukkha, or suffering. Here there is no such association. Yeah, this association comes in, I think the first work to mention it is a kind of commentarial work included in the Sutta Pitaka called Patisambhida Magga. So it said that those meditators who emphasize impermanence, to reach any stage of enlightenment, one has to focus on all three characteristics. But some meditators give more attention to one than to the others. So those who give more attention to impermanence, when they realize Nibbana, will experience it as the signless, without any kind of fixed characteristic. Those who give attention to the characteristic of suffering will experience Nibbana as the desireless. Because when you focus on suffering, then all craving or desire gets eliminated. And those who give attention to non-self will experience Nibbana as emptiness, because emptiness means the absence of any self. But this comes in commentarial texts, not in the suttas themselves. Okay, I think we'll close or stop for the day. And now we won't have a class next week, because next week we have the memorial service for Venerable Renju, the old master of Bodhi Monastery, who passed away a few days ago in Taiwan. So we'll have the next Sutta class in 2 weeks. That should be February 26th. Today is the 12th. Okay, we'll do it the 26th. Have the next class the 26th. And we'll finish this sutta then. And if I finish in advance, then we should do a short one.
The emails we've been receiving have suggested that we were supposed to be reading Sutta number 48.
Oh, did it say today?
Yes.
It said 48.
Oh, I'm sorry. The one
Yeah, I know that the one that was sent out
Yeah.
was it last week.
Yeah.
We can't blame anybody, because my original program would have said last week that we should have been taking 48, but we've been taking more time on this sutta than expected.
The email is a guideline.
Yeah, oh, I see. Not necessarily.
Okay, I think maybe we could fit in 48 next week, maybe finish 47, in 2 weeks, finish 47, and if time allows, we could take 48.
47?
Did I say 47?
You meant 44.
we finished 44. It doesn't hurt for everybody to read 47. It's not hard, and it's useful to read, and it's short, so anyway, we'll see next week, for 2 weeks. But I think we'll try to do the end of 44 and 48. Okay, so we'll end with the sharing of the merits. So we share the merits, and I want particularly to share the merits from today's class with Venerable Renjun Fasher, with whom I stayed for about 4.5 years at Bodhi Monastery, and wish him a happy voyage, a peaceful voyage to his next existence. And we also share the merits with the Devas, Buddhas, and all beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva shiram rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva shiram rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva shiram rakantu mam parang etavata chamhehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata chamhehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe bhudanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata chamhehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe sadanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya vichitato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha sanya samino dukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuddhim. Okay.